Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my AM reading video for Sunday, July 24th, 2022. Hopefully, I will be getting it in right under the wire of Eastern Standard Time if it goes up tonight, so we shall see. Yeah, this weekend kind of got away from me a little bit, but now we're at the very end of it and about to go into the new week. Getting very far away from the whole Friday reads feel, but what can you do? I guess something I should do right now is start the video. So as always with my AM reading videos, I will start with discussing the next short story in this collection by Dorothy Parker, which I have been reading from one story per AM reading video since last May. The story I read this week is called Song of the Shirt 1941, and it was published in 1941. And I really liked this one. It was a longer story. It was a more political story. There was a lot of interesting stuff going on here. This takes place in New York, and it goes into the war and the effect that the U.S. entering World War II has on the people in this story. The character we're following is this well-to-do woman named Mrs. Martindale, usually the sort of character who, in earlier stories, I think Parker really would have taken the mickey out of to take from someone else's culture's, expressions. She is rich. She, the details of her home are lavish, and even when Parker is kind of discussing her heart being so big, there's sort of a air of entitlement about her going around the city, but then we learn that she is doing volunteer work, and she is helping in knitting smocks for the hospitals for the wounded soldiers from the war, and she's having a lot of difficulty with it, with the material and with the good stitching. And of course, one thing that people really want from the women helping out with this volunteer work is for them to move quickly, but also to have very efficient sewing. So it's kind of difficult in that way, And so she's having difficulty and spending a lot of time doing things by hand and like worried about the sewing machines, yada yada, and then they're just so far behind, or there's so much demand that she's asked, and other people are asked to do some work at home. So she, Mrs. Martindale, volunteers to take 12 reams of material for these smocks home with her, and for a while she kind of forgets about them. She puts them in her car with her chauffeur and just wants to walk around the city, do her usual, rich person thing, but she keeps on seeing soldiers in the streets, and she's thinking about when they're wounded and what they need. So really, it's just such a politically apt novel about this slice of life on what it's like during wartime. And so that's when she goes home and she's struggling through these, these tasks, and she gets a phone call from a friend who reached out to her because, even though in a way I thought Parker would be more critical of this character, or, she kind of shows that she has a little bit of, I guess, a shallow side, or, an entitled side. She does have this heart, even though, she doesn't necessarily want to spend her time doing all these, difficult good deeds, but she has this heart that people know about. So her friend calls because she knows somebody, like with a child who has a disability, and she's looking for work, and will Mrs. Martindale help? And so that's what Mrs. Martindale is doing. As the story ends with her struggling through, this task of sewing these smocks, these hospital smocks, and then her brain is going a mile a minute trying to think of helping this other person. So this is, I don't know, I just found this heartening, that Parker actually showed, an optimistic side. Like, she wasn't very critical. I think she was showing somebody of privilege who nevertheless, even when things are difficult, helps out, and it shows a little bit of what it's like during the war. So yeah, I liked this. The first book I finished this week is The Stolen Child by Keith Donohue. I talked about it last week. It was my page 112 tag pick. My sister gifted this to me for my last birthday, before this birthday, which happened about a week ago. She really loved this book, and so I kind of felt like the pressure was on for me, like, would I love it? And the truth is, I don't think I was as enamored with it as she was, but I still thought it was interesting. I still enjoyed my time with it. So anyway, this is a urban fantasy mythology book of sorts that looks at the myth of changelings or hobgoblins or fairies, the idea of these supernatural creatures who steal the lives of children. And so the action takes place starting in the 1940s in sort of the unspecified northeast of the US when this young boy named Henry Day is snatched away and a changeling takes his place. And then for the next 30 years, we follow the new Henry Day, and then we follow the old Henry Day, who is now a changeling called Anna Day, and see what their lives are like. So the new Henry Day, once he kind of becomes human again, starts remembering some of his own past because he was also 100 years ago a snatched child. And so it starts with him picking up his piano prodigy skills or almost prodigy skills, and he does a lot of piano work for a while, and then he sort of gives that up a little bit and has more of, I guess, a stereotypical mid-20th century, collegiate and high school experience with wanting a band, or he also ends up leaving college, which he was in when his father commits suicide. One of the major things in this story is about, like, who believes that this is the same person and who kind of realizes that he is an imposter of sorts or not the old Henry Day. And his father, through a few reasons, does not really trust this new Henry Day. So anyway, he has to leave school and help with the family. Then he gets married and actually starts to research his, previous life. He was a German immigrant with his family, and then it goes into more of the lore that Donohue sets up with the whole idea of fairies and hobgoblins, which we also get from the Anna Day story, which follows him and the other hobgoblins or changelings in the woods in the Northeast. And things are changing a bit for them as well as the woods, becomes more developed. And I think there's supposed to be a little bit of commentary on just how the magical dangerousness is changing because societal norms are changing and the idea of sort of magical danger isn't the same anymore. There's real life dangers for children that are there, without, being snatched away. And honestly, I feel like ultimately the Anna Day sections didn't work as well for me. I would have wanted them to be more magical or more mysterious, and it almost just felt like a lazy sort of Lost Boys ripoff or something, the relationships he had with the other hobgoblins, and it wasn't very consistent with whatever type of message it was trying to convey about what these changelings really are, because sometimes it felt like maybe they were autistic children or something, or children who were different in some way, and that they were, snatched away, and it almost felt like a metaphor for that. And it plays into how in lore, in the medieval times especially, the idea of changelings was if you had a child who had a physical or mental difference, you justified it with, oh, well, my real child was stolen away by the changelings, which really is more of a commentary on prejudice about physical and mental disabilities. But here it's almost like, the children who were snatched away always were a little bit off kilter, but then in their society together they actually kind of, seem to find some sense of normalcy. But I don't know, it was a little just too diffuse for me about what they were really trying to do. And Anna Day being the only one of the hobgoblins really who remembered and was obsessed with his former life, and there was some sort of interplay between the two storylines that I thought kind of took away from, the character stuff, where they were interacting more than maybe they should be. I don't know, I guess I'm just being a little picky. It just didn't really work for me necessarily, but I feel like the stuff that worked for me more is with the imposter Henry Day and how he went through his life with this split personality. And something else I think a lot of viewers thought about this story is like it might be an allegory, or it read in a way kind of like this as an allegory for growing up and realizing that throughout life you are kind of different people at different times, kind of like Henry Day and Anna Day are both Henry Day at different times sort of thing. So it almost felt like there was just a little too much that he was trying to do or could be done with this book, and it didn't fully come together for me. But props for, the idea and for going through, I think, sort of a sense of existential angst in a character, which I can always at least get in line with a little bit. And maybe that's how you can kind of forgive the fact that almost no other characters in this felt completely real, if these main characters are too stuck in their own heads. But yeah, I haven't actually told my sister what I think of it yet. Maybe she'll see this. But I checked it off. The next book I finished this week was an audiobook called In the Quick by Kate Hope Day, which I listened to on my Libby app. It's a science fiction book, and a very short one, it feels like. It was only 8 hours listening to it. And it takes place in the near future, and it's kind of a Jane Eyre in space book, and it's not even the first one of those. But this one, the Jane character is a woman named June who lives with her aunt and uncle, and is sort of like a protege of her uncle, who is this famous scientist who created these fuse cells. I think that's the right word for them, but anyway, these power cells were able, hopefully, to power spaceships on expeditions, and so he unfortunately got sick as the first expedition was taking off, and didn't live to see that actually his fuel cells failed, and the Earth lost contact with the ship, or with the crew. Anyway, during this time, June is having a little trouble with her aunt and her cousin, not quite as much as Jane Eyre did, but still a little, and she is ultimately sent away to a science school, an astrophysicist science school named for her uncle, Mr. Reed, and is fast-tracked because she is supposed to have this amazing scientific mind, and through these experiences, she ultimately joins the track to become an astronomer in space. But we see her along her journey, and her main goal really becomes to see if this crew is still alive out there, and if they can fix the fuel cells and, put things back on track here. And she particularly has some dealings with her uncle's graduate students who worked with him on the fuel cells, and they're only about, I guess, 8 years older than her. She's 12 in the beginning, but then 6 years do pass, and that's when she starts to take on assignments, kind of like the Rochester in space of kind of like the Thornton Hall of in space of sorts, and through these assignments, she gains more scientific know-how to realize, there's a way to confirm whether the crew of this expedition ship is still alive, and then later on she starts to work on the fuel cells with especially one of the graduate students who she becomes involved with. He's kind of a Mr. Rochester character, and another of the graduate students becomes the Bertha character when they are on this pink planet that is part of the story as well. We have real spacefaring and alien planets going on. But actually, I thought in a way the Jane Eyre stuff, although it was fun, was kind of the weakest part of the story for me. I thought I was intrigued by the science. I was a little worried that this would be too literary and not, firm enough on the science. And granted, I don't actually have a science background, so it could have been gobbledygook, but it sounded pretty legit to me, the way they talked about science. And for all of June being a little insufferable sometimes, being sort of a science prodigy, I feel like Dave really got into the idea of understanding science on an esoteric level, like really interrogating what things do. That was like a big thing June and her uncle were about. And a lot of the science was also very collaborative, and was about her and these graduate students talking things out and drawing over each other's drawings and writing over each other's notes, which I felt was like a really exciting way to look at science as not something esoteric and pie in the sky, but something that really is about collaboration and people working together for advancement and the fascination of it. That really helped me along with the story as well. So I really did like this one a fair bit. And it certainly also had a pretty hopeful ending as well, which is something nice with spacefaring science fiction, because the whole idea is to go to the far beyond and, you know, explore what we can explore with as advanced of technology as we can muster up. And of course, when there's people to be saved out there in the black, you know, you want to save them. So it's a little open-ended in that way, but there's definitely that sense of hope with the end of this story. So I remember I listened to a book talk that this author did a year ago when the book came out, and I was both like really intrigued by the way that she talked about the story and a little, I guess, nervous too about, you know, I love literary fiction, I love science fiction, they don't always mesh well together, but I do think this one ultimately was better than I feared it might be. Next, I'm a little ways into this book. This is The Thousand Eyes by A.K. Larkwood. It is the sequel to her first novel, The Unspoken Name. This is epic high fantasy, secondary world fantasy, my sort of favorite. And I kind of feel like this is really, you know, tip-top fantasy for me. This might be like 5 stars. Maybe I'm getting away from myself a little bit, but I really like this type of fantasy. It is so rich in world building, and I think really unique in the way that it handles the mythology of gods and of broken magic systems and cultures, and how the sort of post-apocalyptic future meshes with that. So anyway, and we also have some fun characters to follow along, and I guess I'm going to skirt around spoilers here, but our main characters are almost like in an Indiana Jones situation where they're going to all the planets in their, you know, society with all of these ancient relics, and, you know, often they are pilfering them for profit, you know, to make some money. And, you know, there was some serious magical stuff that happened to them in the last book, and there's some serious magical stuff that they're getting embroiled in this book. And there's strong relationship elements to that about, you know, former mentors and mentees and former and current lovers. And now they're waking up old, you know, gods and acolytes and that sort of thing. And I mean, the truth is, as much as I actually am into this story, I feel like there's just so much world building that I'm not sure I'm even holding on to all of it or can grasp it enough to actually explain it well in here. But I am really enjoying it. Like, it feels epic and unique in a way, and just really enticing and so rich, and I just love world building and fantasy. So I'm only a little ways into it, but I'm having a really fun time reading it. I'm sure I will be done with in a week and can report back on the story as a whole, hopefully. Why do I have to go to work and do other things? Maybe I'd love to just take the time to, you know, get through this quickly. But another reason I can't get through that last book I talked about quickly is because I'm also reading this chunkster. This is BARKSKINS by Annie Proulx. It's been on my Goodreads TBR for a while, and I even mentioned it in my mid-year check-in freak-out tag video as a major read that I was going to try to get through soon. You know, it's a chunkster of a book, so something I easily put off for a lot of time, but once something gets to the top of my Goodreads list, that's when I tend to force myself to read it no matter what. So here we are, talking of epic world building. Historical fiction is also pretty good for that. So this takes place spanning several centuries, or a few centuries, in New France, aka Canada. It starts with these 2 characters who arrive from France as indentured servants to work as barkskins, which are woodcutters, because, you know, the Europeans come to what we now know as Canada and see the lush forests, and mostly they see profit, and they see land that can be, you know, cleared out so that more farms and settlements and people can arrive, and that's how they see these woods. And of course, that's not necessarily the most ecological way to see things, despite what some people at that time might have thought. Proulx definitely has a ecological sort of almost didactic, I suppose, sort of mindset with this book. I'm in early years still in the 17th century following these two men who take on two different sort of journeys, and I think we're going to then follow their families throughout the next couple hundred years and see how they're interacting with their environments, you know, maybe in the 20th century or what have you. So in a way, this reminds me also of Homegoing by Ya Jesse, which also tracks two branches of a family through several generations, although that book was much smaller than this one. I think Proulx went all out to, you know, build up the world around this, and especially with her character Duquet, who is the more ambitious of the two and is going to all sorts of places in an attempt to sort of, you know, create a financial legacy for himself. Like right now, I think in my reading, he is in China doing trading in China, which almost nobody has the gumption to do, and he had to, you know, join an East India trading ship company to do it. There is a lot of just fascinating history in here. I feel like I'd want to suggest this book to my dad, who likes historical fiction, but I think he might be a little nervous about this length. I'm not sure. I mean, so far I'm really enjoying this, and you know, Proulx put in all this work, and I think it's paying off. I know some reviewers, I do think, are a little put off by the didacticism of her ecological message, so I guess it's I'll see if, you know, the story can support it or not. But so far I'm intrigued by, like, the ideas that these characters are espousing and how they, you know, connect to the worldviews of the societies that are, you know, moving New France in certain ways at this time. We also, of course, have dealings with native tribes and their takes on the forests and so forth, and their interactions with the Europeans. So yeah, hopefully I will also be finished with this book maybe next week, or it'll at least be a significant bigger chunk of the way through it, so I'll report back on how things are going then. So that about covers it for me now. Definitely a significant chunk of the way through more of the night of Sunday. And I'm feeling a little anxious here because, as always, we're getting to the end of a month and to some crunch time for me. I have a few new more booktube videos I want to put out, and also some reading and writing goals, some of which have pretty quickly descending deadlines coming up. And of course there's work and all of that, yada yada. So I am in the middle, actually, of filming what will be my next video. Hopefully you'll see from me in the next few days, which is another Try a Story tag, which I try to do these Try a Story tags in July to celebrate my birthday with short stories. And in my second one, I am reading 7 stories from this book, The Best American Short Stories of the Century by John Updike. I've already read a few, and I have a few more I need to read and film, so stay tuned for that. I am a little nervous that I'm not enjoying my reading as much, because I guess I'm feeling overwhelmed and like I want to cram as much in as possible. And when that starts to happen, I feel the crunch and I feel the pressure and the stress, then that takes away from reading, and that's maybe when I need to rear back a little bit. And on that note, I think I am realizing that this month, in July, it is pretty likely that I will be reading only 8 books, which will be my first time in 2022 that I haven't finished 10 books roughly within the month. But I'm trying to make my peace with it, because I'd rather, you know, get a good, thorough experience with what I'm reading rather than, you know, barrel through them, especially when I simply don't have the time anyway, given everything else that's going on. And I'm already feeling a little bit of the crunch and wondering if I'm not enjoying some of my reading as much because I'm overwhelmed and distracted. So anyway, yeah, I'm feeling like 8 books is going to be fine, and hopefully I will get the most out of them. Certainly the last 2 books I talked about have been really good experiences so far, so hopefully that will continue. And I hope you are all feeling the same, enjoying what you're reading, not feeling stressed about any self-imposed quotas to meet in terms of your reading. And I hope those of you with weather like mine are staying cool. It is in the high 90s Fahrenheit in the DC area this week so far, so oi, it's getting pretty hot around here. So anyway, thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.